Greetings, everyone. My name is David McLeod. I am your life mastery coach. Welcome to Magnificence in Motion. This is my relatively new program. This is episode number 6 today, and our topic title is This Brilliant Light of Mine. I want to tell you a little bit about my website, magnificence.com. This is a website in which I share all kinds of courses and streams of material. I've got some ebooks over there. It's a membership site, and I would love to have you go check it out. That's at magnificence.com. And there's memberships at different levels. You can check it all out, read all about it, and have some fun there if you decide to go. Meanwhile, I started doing this program partly as a way to promote my website, but also because I thought it was time to shift away from the Life Mastery TV and into something a little bit more globular. Oh, that's not a very good word. Not a word. Global, I guess. More broad swinging. I mean, my main purpose in life, I think, is to teach people to learn that there's nothing more important than knowing the truth about who you really are. And who you really are is something really special. And part of the thing that we're talking about today is getting down to the essence of who you really are and learning to bring that out and share it in the world without fear, without apology. You know, from the moment we arrive in this world, we are radiant beings of light. We're unfiltered, we're unapologetic, and we're shining with pure authenticity. But as we navigate the complexities of life, that brilliance often dims under the weight of conditioning, programming, expectations, fear, and the belief that we must be something other than who we truly are. I think it's time for us all to reclaim that inner light. So in this episode of Magnificence in Motion, my friend, the radiant Jeanette Stewart, will join me for a heart-centered conversation about embracing your authentic nature and sharing it boldly with the world. Our intention today is to provide a powerful exploration of what it means to rediscover, nurture, and fully express the essence of who you really are. So please join me in welcoming Jeanette Stewart to the program. Hello, Jeanette. So great to have you here again. We always have great conversations, and I'm sure this one's going to be no different. So how are you?
I'm doing great. It's great to be here, and this is one of my most favorite topics of shining our authentic light and being the truest self that we came here to be. So I look forward to our conversation very much.
Right. I agree with you. It's one of my favorite topics as well. The idea of, well, authenticity is maybe a little bit of a cliche word. It's getting used an awful lot in this space these days. However, I can't think of a better word to describe it. It's really about showing up as who I really am and not being afraid of what people might think of that. How do you see it? I mean, does that resonate with you? Is that your idea of authenticity?
Oh, yeah. I think we came here for a specific purpose, and we were very clear in what we were going to do once we got here. And then we forget. And like you said, you were talking about the conditioning and all of that, that it takes a while to get back on our footing for shining our light and being the Jeanette I can be, and you being the Davidist David, Annette being the Annettist Annette, and Wendy being the Wendyest Wendy.
Right.
Because we all have our unique gifts and ways of moving through the world, and it's important that we step into the truth of who we really are.
Yeah, and I think it's important not just because it helps us to have better lives, although that's certainly a powerful and important reason, but because when we deny the truth of who we really are, we're actually doing the world a disservice. We are withholding truth. We are failing to show up as who we really are. And the problem is most of us don't even realize we're doing it, because of this conditioning and the programming that we pretty much all experience, starting from the moment we emerge from the womb. we're immediately told things about ourselves that, may or may not be true. Certainly our parents tell us things that they want to be true. And I remember, I think one of the stories I've shared with you before, I remember when I was only just a little over 2 years old, I was getting close to 3, I think. And I had that situation where my mom ended up telling me, I know you better than you know yourself. And those 8 words completely shifted my perspectives on life, because I realized, well, Mom, she's like the biggest and most important person in my life. She certainly knows me better than anybody else does. She always takes care of all my wants and needs. She would never lie to me. And so I adopted that as a true statement. And because of that, I started thinking, well, if Mommy knows me better than I know myself, well, Daddy does too. And so does Grammy and Grampy and Uncle Jane and Auntie George and my teacher, Miss Smith, and all the other people in my life. They all know me better than I know myself. And as a result, I started deferring. And so the rest of my life became an exercise in showing up the way I thought they wanted me to be.
I
think that's
get that.
a common experience for a lot of people, although you may not have had it in exactly the same way. We all go through different kinds of conditioning, for sure.
Oh, right, right. Yeah, societal, family, what's trending in the world. I I was tall as a kid, and so I would try to shrink myself, and my folks would tell me to stand up. You know, um, there's a very small box of normal to fit into in the world, and it
Exactly.
changes all the time.
Right, right.
And then when you discover that you can break that box, you don't even have to try to squirm into that little box, that you are this radiant being of light, and you're here for a unique purpose, and you have unique gifts. And we don't have to be like everyone else. We just need to be our truest self.
Yeah, yeah. I love that idea. This box that we end up getting shoved into is really quite small.
Yeah.
It's, you remind me of so many things that are kind of funny to think about now. Like my parents getting all excited because I would learn to speak and I would learn to think and I would learn to have logical statements until I said something they disagreed with. Then it was sit down and shut up, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing, I know that, our parents are trying to do the best that they can at the moment,
Right.
but like I was told, children are to be seen and not heard. So it
Exactly.
took a long time to be able to express my views and know that I was worthy of sharing my words with the world. So,
Yeah. And so we end up kind of taking on all these personas. We put on masks, we put on costumes, we wear capes, we pretend to be superheroes or whatever in our own life. We kind of put on these costumes in order to show up in an appropriate manner wherever we happen to be. So I have a special costume for going to work. I have a special costume for going to church. I have a special costume for doing this thing or that thing or whatever. All these costumes are kind of saying to the world, all right, this is who I am. This is who I am. I want you to see me as a, beautiful, upright, law-abiding citizen, and I want to be welcomed and felt like I belong in this group. That's kind of what we do.
mhm.
And then some people will adopt other strategies. For example, you've got certain people who like to tell jokes and they get very funny. And that's their way of trying to gain acceptance. And sometimes the jokes and the laughter are done at very inappropriate places, right? Not inappropriate places, but at inappropriate times. And so they've lost control of the costume that they put on in order to fit in, and have really lost the sense of who they really are. So
Yeah, I agree that there's many masks that we wear during our lifetime in different places, and to get to a point where we're comfortable showing our true self in all circumstances. That's something that I continue to work on. To remember that I am a magnificent being of light, and I came here for a certain reason, and I don't have to be like that person or that person. I just have to be me. And
Right.
we're most happy when we're free to be our true self. When we step onto that stage and acknowledge the magnificence of ourselves, right? When we get to that point, and it takes a long time to get to that point where
Yeah.
we know that we're worthy and deserving just as we are, and we're all that. Each
Yep.
one of us, we just have to get to that point. It's back in the 60s, we had a rock tumbler. And so that thing, it was noisy. It had to be going for like days on end, it seemed, so you kept hearing these rocks tumble, tumble, tumble. But when they were done, they were beautiful gems, right? And I feel kind of that that's how life is to us. We go through the
Yeah.
tumbler and come out, and you know, where all those hard places have been worn down, and the beauty of who we really are is showing through. And that's a beautiful spot to get to.
Right.
And yeah,
I think that that's a beautiful metaphor, by the way. You use these tumblers in order to, get the dirt and junk off these rocks, presumably because you want to see them as more valuable so that you can sell them and whatever, or
yeah.
just have them on your altar or whatever it is you want to do with them. One of the downsides of a rock tumbler, though, that I think of is all of the edges are smoothed out. And sometimes edges are good. Think of a diamond or another faceted stone. Those edges are really what help to highlight the beauty of whatever it is we're looking at.
Yeah.
So while I agree that it's good to have this experience of maybe having a tumbler that just pulls away the costumes and the masks to
Mhm.
reveal the true essence inside, that would be great. But I don't want to lose those edges or those facets of myself that are really, really so special, that are maybe very different from what other people have. So
Oh, I
that's
like
that's the
that.
only thing I would say about that.
Yeah, I like that, David. That's great. We have the most fascinating conversations when we get together. So I really
Right.
love that. Yeah. And, another downside with the rock tumbler is that it was noisy and we had to put it in a spot where it wasn't interrupting our family life, and it seems like you had to put like salt or something in it,
Right.
and kind of had to monitor it, and, you know, electricity and noise and all of that. So,
Yeah.
love
Well,
that.
I think though that ultimately what we're talking about here is, I think the thing about the rock tumbler and that metaphor is it takes time. It takes time to pull away the masks and the costumes. And think about it. You've spent a lifetime or half of a lifetime donning all these costumes, putting on all these masks, showing up in all these different ways. And why? Well, to protect that core essence of who you really are from being damaged by people who can't accept you for who you really are. And why can't they accept you for who you really are? Because they're busy faking who they are too.
Yeah.
And this is the kind of problem that we have created in our world. We have a whole world of sleepwalking fakers running around pretending to be something that they're not, because they have this idea that that's what I have to do in order to create a world that's worthy of everybody to live in. And it's really messed up.
Yeah. It
And
really
I mean, I
is.
did that I was doing that continuously for the first 40 years of my life. Well, actually longer than that, because it wasn't until I was in my 40s that I realized how much I had been doing it. And then I had to start figuring out how to undo all that. And the undoing part is the part that took me the time. And while I was undoing it, believe me, I was pretty awkward at times. I would try to be my authentic self, and somebody would get upset because I said something that normally I would have withheld, right? So there are those moments when you're going through this process of the tumbler where, you might accidentally do something, certainly not out of malice or anything like that. You might actually say something or do something that somebody gets upset about. Well,
Well,
that's another
yeah.
little piece of the puzzle, isn't it?
hmm
Maybe
It's,
sorry, go ahead. You're going to say, sorry.
no, I was just going to agree with you, David, that, especially when we're stretching those authentic muscles of ours, right? And people aren't used to us speaking up or doing a certain thing or claiming something that is very important to us. And, sometimes those those people kind of fall away as well. I was in a book collaboration, and one of the chapters, a woman that I really respect wrote, was talking about life being like a train, that there's certain stations along the way, and people get on and off different stops. Sometimes you drive with the folks, just a short distance. Sometimes you
Right.
go with them of a far distance. But, I thought that that was a really important metaphor as well. That just because someone's on the train doesn't mean you have to go the whole distance with them.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a great metaphor. I hadn't
hmm
thought of it that way, but it kind of correlates with something that I've seen myself in terms of relationships that I have. I think of myself in some ways like a river, you know, and my river is flowing in a particular direction. And then for a while, your river comes along and we join up for a while, and we may stay together for a long time, even if we're not physically in the same space. We have our energies that are sharing space together, and maybe partway down the way, the rivers will part again. That and that to me is what really relationship is like. Relationships can be really short or they can be really long. I mean, ultimately, every relationship is forever, even though it may not feel that way for us. But you have to think of it in terms of the physical versus the spiritual. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I like that metaphor about the river, and especially, David, that you and I got to meet each other when I was up in your area and walk
right,
beside the Boise River. Um,
right, yeah,
so that was
yeah,
really great.
yeah. That was beautiful. Yeah. So I guess what we're really saying here is all of us, because of the conditioning and the programming, we learn to take on certain roles and personas and behaviors and qualities and attitudes and so on in order to fit in order to be a part of the society that we have chosen to belong to. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. A certain amount of socialization, I think, is necessary in order for us to all live together. I mean, much as we all would like to just do exactly what we want whenever we want, regardless of what anybody else has to say about it, everything that I think, say, do, or feel has an impact. It has a consequence. And if I'm not willing to take responsibility for those consequences, I could cause somebody some really serious harm with some of the choices that I make. So all of us have to learn to temper our choices with the possible outcomes that we create. And, I can do anything that I want. I'm free to do anything as I want, as long as that doesn't impede on your freedoms in some way or cause you harm in some way. That's really what I think we have to adopt, right?
Yeah, yeah. And getting back to the social norms, some of the things I remember hearing growing up is, oh, she thinks she's too big for her britches,
Oh God,
so
yes, I
like
heard that.
like uh, well-meaning people like want to keep you small. Okay, so and that's their blinders, right? That's like women should do this and not this. You know, I don't agree with this or that. And I remember one of my teachers said something to me in high school and said, "Oh, you are really becoming a clothes horse." And I had no idea what that meant. And I think I went home and asked my mom. There was no Google at that time. Um, and you know, what does a clothes horse mean? You know, and what this teacher meant was, you know, that I was, you know, fashionable or whatever, you know, which was a good thing. But like, you know, is he calling me a horse? Am I as big as a horse? Do these pants make me look as big as a horse? You know, all of
Am
those
I too
things.
big for my horse?
Yeah, yeah. Are my britches too tight, too big? Yeah, all of that. So,
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
I remember I had a similar. I I heard don't you're too big for your britches, but that was something that I heard from my grandmother more than anybody else. My mom's statement when she was getting exasperated with me was, "You're so full of yourself." And you know, at the time I thought, well, who else would I be full of? You know,
yeah, yeah. Right, right,
I was
right.
a smart ass too, as you probably have figured out by now. Who else would I be full of? I mean, of course I'm full of myself. I would hope so. In fact,
Yeah,
let's all be full of ourselves. Isn't that what we're talking about today?
that's what we are talking about today. And, you know,
Yeah,
being our most brilliant, radiant self, right?
right.
We have so many wonderful qualities within us that, you know, that bring us joy. And those are the things that we should be focusing on, right? Not like,
Yeah,
oh, you know, I need to do this because this is, you know, the socially accepted thing for a woman of my age, a man of my stature to be doing at this point in life. But, you know, once we focus on that joy and what brings us joy and focus on that, it's like, you know, it's an upward spiral because when I'm filled with joy, it radiates out and ripples out into the world as a great thing, you know, and so it can change lives by me being my most authentic, brilliant self, you know, focusing on what fills my cup, right? And that, you know, talking about self care and doing the things that we love because we all have special talents and gifts that light us up.
yeah, absolutely. And you know, getting to that place where you're able to uh, embrace, first of all, recognize and then embrace your true essence, that beautiful, brilliant light. As I was explaining earlier, it may take a little work. You may have to do some introspection and some processing in order to kind of take off all those layers that you've put on yourself and to get down to the nitty gritty of who you really are. And while that's happening, as I said, you're kind of like a kid learning to ride a bicycle, and you've never ever even seen a bicycle, let alone been on one. And maybe those training wheels are a little difficult to get a hold of, to get a handle on. So it can be awkward. It can be there can be some stumbles. You can scrape your knee or whatever. And not only that, and this is something that I was alluding to earlier. Sometimes you'll say or do things that upset other people. Now the question is, are you going to take responsibility for what somebody else feels? If you actually have done something deliberately to hurt them, then absolutely you have to take responsibility for that. But if you're just simply showing up as who you really are, and someone else doesn't like that because they preferred the old you, well, maybe that's something for them to work on.
Mhm.
You have to kind of learn to be discerning in that regard. I understand that you're not happy with how I'm shifting and changing and growing and expanding. That's okay. Maybe this will be a reminder that you too can do the same thing if you want to.
Right.
And
And
if you, yeah, go ahead.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Well, and
I'm sorry. I
sometimes
have way too much to say on this topic.
and sometimes they're upset because it's triggering the same thing within them, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that's always the case. Um, you know, think about kinds of conversations that we have as adults. You made me feel, I'm upset with you because you made me feel. Well, I'm sorry, I don't have that power. I can't make you feel anything. I can say things, I can do things, I can, you know, those are the qualities and the controls that I have. But how you feel is your responsibility. How you
Yeah.
react is your responsibility. And
Yeah.
and if I can control how you feel, geez, maybe you're giving me too much power.
Exactly. David, I had a work training and the facilitator was involved with a conversation between two people, and one of them said, "You make me so mad," you know, something like that. And she's like, you know, they can't make you mad. You're allowing their behavior to affect you. You know, you're giving your personal power away.
Exactly.
And when she said that, I'm like, oh, wow, that's so true. And I felt more empowered to know that, oh, I'm giving my power away when I'm being bothered or troubled or affected by them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and this is not to minimize or negate whatever you might be feeling. You know, so you and I could be having some kind of reaction, and I could say something like, "Jeanette, you really make me mad when you say that." Or I could be more authentic and real and genuine and say, "Wow, Jeanette, because after you said that, I noticed I had a reaction inside. I had this reaction, and all of a sudden, this really strong anger started floating up, and I started having judgments about you. I wonder what that's about." Wow, that's a whole different kind of conversation, isn't it?
Yeah, that's empowering yourself, to be curious, right?
Yeah,
Of why it's happening instead of just like, you know, letting it overthrow your life and not thinking about it, because that's how we tend to do a lot is, when we're upset, we just react out instead of taking the time to respond, taking that pause and be curious, like, I wonder what this is here to teach me. Yeah, and I mean, imagine that conversation, David, that between two people being curious, how that could empower both. And yeah, I love that. That's definitely an example of shining your light, right? Instead of like being all flame and mad, like uh, you know,
yeah,
uh, aggressive. The more turning the lens on ourselves of why is this bothering me so much?
yeah. And like I said, uh, I know you and I both have been doing this work for a long time. And just because we've been doing this work and we've learned to maybe embrace and shine our light a little more, it doesn't mean we don't have those other moments.
Okay,
I
exactly.
still have, my ego mind is still quite active in my life. Thank you very much. And I still have to deal with it, right?
Mhm. Yep.
And when it happens, I have to stop myself. I have to say, okay, what's going on? What is my ego mind going on about right now? And for me, it's a case of pausing and saying, okay, I hear you've got something to say. You're upset with me about this, that, or the other thing. Tell me what it is. Help me understand what it is. Just by having that little conversation privately in my little room somewhere, my ego mind tends to quiet down almost immediately when that happens. It'll say, well, you're not paying attention to this, and if you do what you are wanting to do, you're going to get hurt because that's what happened to you every other time in your life. And now I say to my ego mind, thank you so much for that. You're right. That sort of thing has happened in the past. I'm an adult now, and I have adult powers that I didn't have when I was a kid. So I think I can handle this situation and step into it, even though you might think it's risky. Because one thing I have learned about my life is that 98% of the things that my ego mind is afraid of are complete falsehoods. They're complete illusions. In fact, I'd even go as high as 99%. I really don't think that most of the things my ego mind is afraid of have really ever happened in my life. You know?
Yeah. And our ego is looking out for us. You know, it wants us to be protected and safe. And, you know, it also is trying to keep us small, right? Not getting too big for our britches or,
Exactly.
uh, putting that out. I love in Big Magic, written by Elizabeth Gilbert, when she talks about ego, she talks about the ego and going on a road trip. Like, ego is going with you, but do you want ego to be in the driver's seat, making the plans of where you're going to stop, where you're going to eat, what sights you're going to see, the route, or are you going to put ego in the back seat and, you know, thank them for being along with the journey, for, you know, being the one to bring up, oh, be careful, the speed limit's 25 and you're going 27. And I just really loved her way of talking about that because, you know, the ego is part of us. And, you know, am I going to give them full control? No, I'll have them in the back seat. And that was just a really great chapter in Big Magic. I remember underlining that thing, and I refer to that so much because the poor ego gets a bad rap. You know, we think, oh, ego is bad, but ego is a part of us, and ego is, you know, trying to keep us safe and all of that. And maybe in the tumbler of life, the ego is going to be, you know, not as prominent as it once was.
Right. I have a friend who has a similar metaphor. Again, he uses a different approach. He talks about the ship of life. You're on a ship. And who is the captain of your ship? Well, for most of us, the captain of our ship is the ego, because the ego has conducted a mutiny and thrown the real captain in the brig. And the real captain, of course, is your essence, your soul, the real you, right? And so what has to happen is you've got to find a way to free your soul, free that essence, liberate it. And this is what we've been talking about. I'm peeling off those layers and getting down to the nitty gritty, and then allowing it to come forth on its own. Now, remember, your spiritual nature is not an aggressive kind of essence. It simply exists. It knows that it is perfectly safe under all circumstances. Nothing needs to be done. Your spiritual nature knows this. It's the ego, which is part of your physical nature, right, that has all of these fears. And it is the ego that tends to shut things down. The spirit, it wants to be free and liberated and just kind of express itself. The ego says, no, 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 we got to shut that down. That's why the soul ends up in the brig for most of us.
Mhm.
At least until we do the kind of work that we've been talking about today and learn to liberate that part of ourselves.
Yep.
And then we reinstate the soul, that spiritual essence, the true essence of who we are. We reinstate that as the captain of our ship and allow the ego just to be tame and controlled and to be the lookout or the navigator or the co-pilot. Now, I wouldn't even give him the co-pilot position. Navigator, maybe, you know. He gets to go up in the crow's nest and check things and just warn us about dangers that might be on the horizon. That's the beauty of it. So I think that the secret here is for us, regardless of what kind of a metaphor you want to choose, the secret is unleashing our spiritual nature, our true spiritual nature, calming and quieting our ego mind and letting it be a supporting member of the cast rather than the leader. And that's really what I think this is all about.
That is beautiful, David. I totally agree with that. About probably 14 years ago, I had a little note on my screensaver when I would sign on at work, and it had the quote about being the captain of your ship. I am the captain of your ship,
Right.
which I think comes from, I can't think of it at the moment. It's a famous work. But anyway, I love that. And that we can step up into our greatness by being our most authentic self and shining our light, you know. So that was fabulous.
Yeah, well, thank you. And so I just wanted to say to everybody who's here on this show live, thank you for being here. Please, if you feel like you want to contribute something, like maybe throw a comment in the chat or something, or ask a question, just go ahead and do that, and we will respond to that as we proceed. So, Jeanette, we've talked a little bit about this idea of peeling back the layers, trying to get down to that truth. Now, I know I have some processes that I like to share with people. What kind of suggestions do you have for people to start that process if they're just getting started, or to enhance the process if they've already started?
Yeah, that's a great question, David. For me, it's journaling. And by journaling, writing down my thoughts, looking at something that can be troubling me at the time brings me clarity, and that's my go-to. So I'd be curious, anyone else find journaling helpful? And if so, if you can write yes in the chat. What about you, David? What's your process?
Well, journaling has been a big part of my process for a long time. Um, I've always liked writing, but I've also now kind of transitioned a little bit. I do a lot of meditating now. So for me, it's more about introspection without necessarily having to write anything down. Um, both of these are powerful tools, and I use them together sometimes, you know. But the most powerful form I have found is just simply asking myself the question, "Who am I?" and writing down the answers, you know. And sometimes I'll shift it to say, instead of "Who am I?" I'll say, "What am I?" and see what kind of new questions come out. Or even, "How am I?" I find, because most often we answer those questions with "I am something," whatever that something might be. And that means we have an answer of some kind. And of course, what I have learned for myself is the answers keep changing. The more I ask the question, the more the answers change. And I also have noticed that at first, the answers seem somewhat superfluous. You know, they're kind of on the shallow surface. But as I continue asking the questions, I get deeper and deeper and deeper until I begin to realize all those previous answers weren't really true.
Yeah,
That's the beauty of it. So it's a powerful process. Just, you know, I mean, who am I is like one of the most potent questions in the universe, right?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that is for sure. Also, another thing is getting out in nature, and it can
Right.
just be as easy as me going out to my front yard or backyard, or if you can't get out, that looking at images of nature, that helps bring clarity and peace. My friend Wendy, that's here, she takes pictures of clouds and flowers. So, you know, that's her way of connecting with nature, and
Right.
posts those so that they can be shared into the world. You know, that's her shining her light, right?
Yeah, that's
Um,
beautiful. Yeah. And you know, you talk about going out in nature. I think what's also important, um, we have to disconnect from all of the electronic devices that we have in our world. Most people will not go out in nature without a cell phone. Well, all you're doing there is you're keeping connected to that electronic grid. Here's my challenge to you. Take a drive somewhere and find a nice place where you can just go out for a walk and leave your phone in your car. and then go for a walk and notice if there's any difference in the way you feel about your walk compared to when you take your phone with you. You know, how often, I mean, whenever I just walk my dog, I leave my phone at home. I don't take it anywhere with me when I go out to walk. But my point is turning the phone off, turning all electronics off, disconnecting from that electronic noise that's surrounding you all the time just helps you to reconnect to the truth of who you are. You know, that's a powerful, powerful thing. It's hard to believe, you know, how much we are bombarded with electronic signals in our lives. So
That's
I
that's a
really
great
recommend that.
challenge. That's a great challenge, David.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, I love taking my phone with me and capturing pictures of, wow, look at that flower, look at that cloud, look at
Yeah.
this heart I found on the ground. You know, so that would really be a stretch for me. So it's probably time for me to try that.
Well, it's not a commandment. It's a
No,
suggestion.
but
That's
it's
all
a
it is.
suggestion. Yeah,
Yeah. Uh,
it's great.
well, you know, that's something I've noticed. I mean, many people are very, very tightly tied to their cell phones. You know, I go to a restaurant and I see two people in a booth in a restaurant and each one is on their phone. I'm thinking, what's the point of going to a restaurant if you can't put that down and just have a conversation?
Yeah,
The funniest
exactly.
joke I've heard is that these people are texting each other on the phone.
Instead of communicating. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Isn't that
Well, because you
wild?
can't speak in emojis.
Yeah.
Uh, I I was one of the very, very, very late comers to a cell phone. You know, I remember cell phones were really becoming popular in the late 90s. And I never got one until probably it has to be 2004 before I actually bought a cell phone, something like that. Uh, and now, yeah, I use it just like everybody else does. I'm on it all the time, and I have to take myself off it. You know, it's an effort.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Um, I last week when I got back from vacation, my phone was on vacation still. It didn't want to come back, I guess. And so I was without my phone for a day and a half.
oh my
And
goodness.
at first it was really freaky. And then the next afternoon, I'm like, wow, this is really peaceful.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
without the bings and bongs and emails and oh, I need to respond quickly. You know, it was freeing for sure. But I was also very glad that it was back in business when I took it to the phone store. They did a simple reset and I was back in business. But yeah, we definitely it's definitely, and if it weren't for technology, David, you and I wouldn't be here, and our friends in the audience, live or listening to the recording, wouldn't be with us either. So
Well,
there's
that's true. Yep.
there's lots
I'm
of
not trying.
good
I'm
things.
not trying to say that technology is bad. It certainly has its
Right.
place. Uh, I am merely suggesting that one of the ways I get in touch with my true self is by separating myself from my technology.
Yeah.
And that's something that, you know, we can all do. Now, that doesn't mean to say I turn off every computer in my house or anything like that, or shut down the router or any of that stuff. It just means I find a room where I can leave everything else out of there, and that room is my place for being present with who I am.
Yeah.
That's
Your
something anybody
private,
can do. Yeah,
yeah, your
yeah,
private sanctuary. Love that.
yeah, yeah.
Great
Now,
suggestion.
you mentioned journaling. Do you have any other suggestions about things people can do to kind of what's the word I want to say? Peel back the layers and get down to the truth?
Yeah. Also, if you have a friend that is empowering, having a conversation with your friend about this topic, things that you're going through, the journaling, the nature, being by a body of water is very empowering as well. I love to take Epsom salts baths, and that seems to help me have a better night's sleep, and relaxing for muscles and all of that, which is another one of my daily go-to things to keep my vibration high, right? It also is very cleansing and detoxifying. Moving your body. Sometimes just putting on some music and moving your body can make that shift happen and bring forth more clarity as well.
Yeah, those are great suggestions. And when you mentioned music, it made me think of, I love creating music. I am a musician. That's one of my I ams,
Yeah,
and but that music for me is like a natural process. It just happens. I can sit down at a keyboard and something will come out. Something that has never come out before will come out. And I try to capture these, and I create music videos and all that kind of, not videos, music albums and that sort of thing. But another thing is poetry, writing poetry. And we talked about journaling a moment ago. I have found that a lot of my journaling ends up being very poetic in nature. So I end up pulling out chunks of those journaling sessions and end up creating poetry out of it. So there's that. And you
awesome.
mentioned about the body of water. I love that idea. Sitting, especially if the water is flowing. If you can be by a river or a stream or something, or better yet, a waterfall. Waterfalls are magical.
Yeah,
Sit beside a waterfall, or if you're really brave, sit in the waterfall, and just let that water flow over you. It's so invigorating, enlivening, and it really helps you to feel the truth of who you really are. So just wanted
yeah,
to suggest those as well.
great. And I see Wendy was giving you some love about that one
Yeah,
as well. And so many people benefit by just being in the shower, and it
right.
it helps to provide that connection to creativity. Some people say they get their best ideas when they're in the shower
Yeah,
or in the tub, right? I'm looking at my screensaver, and it's a picture of the coast of Oregon,
nice.
Cannon Beach, I think it is. So I always have water near me, and drinking and
Hmm.
all of that. And so water is a big part of my life. And in fact, two of my loved ones are born in February, which is the sign of Aquarius, so water. And my birthstone, and David, your birthstone, is aquamarine. So, there's a lot of that water essence in our makeup as well. And we're all made of, what is it, 65% water,
70%, 70%
70%
water. Yeah.
water?
Mhm. Yep. 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 And then, you think about what that guy, oh God, I can never remember his name, that Japanese scientist who studied
Oh,
water.
Emoto,
Matsui?
Emoto, is it?
I can't remember his name. And he did some
And
amazing research. And a lot of people have been kind of expanding on that ever since.
yeah,
Um, yeah, it's really fascinating how water itself seems to have some kind of memory. So whatever energy you bring towards water, the water tends to absorb it. Well, given that you're 90% water, it kind of follows that energy kind of gets absorbed by the water in your body. So whatever you expose yourself to is what is affecting your body. So think about that, and just bring loving energy, loving, healing, supportive, gratitude, forgiveness, compassion kind of energy. Bring that to your body and to your beingness, and allow yourself to experience that. And that helps you then to embrace your brilliant light even more, and then to share it more generously with the world.
That's beautiful.
The
David, I had to
fluoro.
Google it. I had to Google it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you're not familiar with his work, it's amazing. And they take pictures of the water crystals, like you're saying loving, peaceful words to some water, and there's crystals that form these beautiful crystals. And then the other experiment was saying hateful words, you're ugly, I hate you, things like that, and taking pictures of the water crystals, and they were remarkable.
Oh yeah.
So
Right.
yeah, if you haven't checked that out, I put the name in the chat there for you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really amazing when we think about it. I mean, we're all made of energy ultimately. At the I will say not at the cellular level, but at the quantum level. And
Mhm.
energy is consciousness. Consciousness is energy. You know, so what we need to do. I'm sure that some scientific person could argue with that statement and say, well, that you can't prove that. Well, maybe so. There's a lot of things you can't prove. That doesn't mean they're not true. You know, uh, so there are certain things that we know to be true because they have a resonance in our essence. We can just feel them, we
Yeah,
know things to be true. We don't need proof. I think that's what they
right.
call faith, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
um, yeah. And we have this inner wisdom, the wisdom of the ages flowing through our veins, as so we're more remarkable than we even give ourselves credit for. A lot of times we're doubting, oh, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. But a lot of times, if we do just spend the time in quietude, those answers will come. And they're in there. We just have to find them and move forward in faith, David.
Yeah. Well, and that there's something else here too, I think, Jeanette. Um, the answers are indeed there. They're not really inside, although we I don't know where they are, to be honest. We have this kind of illusion that we are a body and we are containing the soul, and the body is a container. That's how we see it. But I think we've got it backwards, honestly. I think that the body is being contained by the soul, not the other way around. And
Ooh,
so when I do meditation, I have this, I close my eyes and I kind of try to disassociate from my body and just allow my essence. There's a way in which my mind sees it as a descent into the deepest part of myself. And yet when I make that descent into the deepest part of myself, what I discover is that it's expansive. It's like, how can I be descending into something that's bigger than me? That's the weird part of it. I cannot explain it in words. There are no words that I can figure out to make sense of that. But that's how it feels. It's kind of like I'm going down, and then all of a sudden I'm out there in everything. I'm in universal space.
yeah.
It's
Uh,
beautiful. It's fantastic.
I was going to say, it sounds like you're describing stepping into the infinity within us, and our
Yeah.
minds have a hard time with that concept. But that's probably a discussion for another episode.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Certainly.
But yeah, I mean, we could talk all morning long.
Right.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
these are
beautiful. It's beautiful.
wonderful. Yeah,
Right.
wonderful.
So, we still have a few minutes left here. I don't want to rush off. Um, I know that you've had some experiences in your own life where you went through some challenges and stuff. So how did you find your way to embracing your own brilliant light? Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah. So I had a career in public finance and HR for the last 24 years of my career, and it was at a local public agency. So there was a lot of, political things involved in being a special district and all of that. so there were rules to follow and guidelines and all of that. Um, but I could find a way to express my creativity by staying within the rules, playing in the sandbox that was there. Um, and, you know, shining my light as only I can, even in the confines of an 7 to 4 job.
Right.
That it didn't change my essence. It was more like the container that I was allowed to express. But the one of the biggest things was when I was journeying with pancreatic cancer 6 years
Right.
ago, and that really brought to the forefront, that I wanted to live. I wanted to do things. I wanted to have the health and resources that I was able to do things. And I wasn't afraid to die, but I wasn't ready. And
Right.
so,
Mhm.
I was focusing on getting well. I wasn't focusing on getting sick. And so that I knew in faith that brighter days were ahead and that cancer would be with me for a season, but her lessons would last a lifetime. And so
Nice.
I wrote a lot about that on my healing journey to give people hope, right? Because we always have to have hope.
Hmm.
Even in the darkest ages, the darkest of times, when my brother was in hospice care, I still had hope. He was passing away, but my hope had changed, right? My hope was, I hope he knows how much we love him. I hope he's not suffering. It was a different hope. Early on it was the hope of I want a miracle for him. But the hope changed, but the hope was still there.
Right.
So those are some of the ways that I have navigated through life, through hard times, and
Hmm.
focused on the light and focused on what's important to me and how I want to show up in the world, right? I want to be the Jeanette Jeanette I can be. And I also feel a duty to shine my light, and be a beacon of hope in the world. And it's almost 10 years that I've had my business Angel Angles, and have been sharing every day about love and light and joy and peace.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. I mean, that really kind of says it all, don't you think? Yeah. And I agree with you. Hope is a beautiful thing. Uh, on the one hand, it may give us the motivation to keep moving forward, but there is something we got to be careful about hope, because hope, if we put all our energy into hope, we're actually putting our energy into something in the future rather than staying present to where we are right now. So I think hope can be a great, like a target to be going for. Kind of like my vision for a world, the kind of the world that I want to live in, the kind of world that I would like to create, to do my best to bring that kind of world into existence. That's like my driving mission, if you like. So I think we're using different words for the same basic thing. Um, but like most people, I don't want to be stuck in the past, and I certainly don't want to be focusing so much on the future that I forget to live for right now.
Right,
That's
right,
really, I think, the most important.
right.
Well,
Um,
that's just my
yeah,
personal opinion. Other people may disagree.
I agree that the now is so important, and they say the now is the only moment you have. If you're focusing on what happened in the past, you're living in the past. If you're spending all your time saying, "Oh, someday I'm going to do this,"
Yeah.
we have to shine our light in this present
now.
moment now.
Yep, that's right. And if everybody could do that, imagine how beautiful and brilliant the world would be.
Exactly. It's the kind of world we want to live in, David.
Right. Thank you. So, Jeanette, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on my show again. I always love having our conversations, and I find myself just smiling a lot when I'm with you. Do you have any final words you'd like to share before I begin closing us out?
Well, I'd just like to thank everyone for joining us today. If you're listening to the recording, you're in this beautiful energy. And just to remind you to be your most brilliant self, your truest self, being the youest you can be, because that's what you came here for. And you're here for a unique purpose, and to find that and shine that light.
Exactly right. Well, thank you so much, Jeanette, for being here. And thank you, everybody, for being here on the live presentation. And for those of you watching the recording, thank you for doing that. I'd just like to remind you that the recording of this and every other episode of my program will be on my website at magnifessence.com. And so before I close out, I'd like to remind you about my life mastery mantra. I'd like you to take this to heart and begin to practice it on your own at home. It goes like this. It's just 3 lines to remember. Very, very simple. I gratefully forgive the imperfect being I have been in the past. I gratefully accept the magnificent being I am right now. I gratefully welcome the evolved being that I am becoming in each new moment. So thank you once again for being here. My name is David McLeod, your life mastery coach, wishing you love, light, and blessings on your continuing journey. I'll see you next time on Magnificence in Motion. Bye-bye.